Your phone again. It's been 3 hours. No reply. Your chest tightens like a fist around your heart, and suddenly you're drowning in a spiral of thoughts, replaying every conversation, every glance, every moment of silence between you. But here's what no one tells you about that ache burning in your stomach, that panic hiding behind your composed face. It's not love, it's survival. You're living in an emotional minefield, constantly bracing for an explosion that may never come but feels inevitable with every breath you take. You've convinced yourself this intensity means something profound, that the chaos churning inside you is proof of how deeply you care. But caring shouldn't feel like suffocating. Real love doesn't make your nervous system collapse into fragments. It doesn't make you shrink into someone smaller, overthink every word until it loses meaning, or second-guess your worth like it's a question with no answer. What you're experiencing isn't romance wrapped in beautiful suffering. It's anxiety wearing love's mask. And it's not poetic. It's exhausting. You're addicted to the highs and lows, mistaking the emotional whiplash for genuine connection. But Carl Jung understood something most people refuse to face. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Maybe this moment, this realization that you're calling your anxiety love, is your wake-up call. The person who constantly makes you question your peace, who leaves you walking on eggshells in your own life, isn't your soulmate. They're your mirror, reflecting back all the inner work you've been avoiding, all the healing you've postponed while searching for someone else to make you whole. Until you face that reflection honestly, you'll keep calling your trauma bonding love. You'll keep mistaking familiarity for fate, comfort for connection. The truth is, letting go feels like death, because in many ways it is. It's the death of the illusion that someone else could ever be your home, the end of the fantasy that external validation could fill the void that's been echoing inside you since childhood. You keep returning to what hurts you, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. Even when the pain cuts deep, at least you know its shape, its rhythm, its predictable patterns. You've mapped every contour of this suffering until it feels safer than the unknown territory of healing. But Jung knew that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And sometimes that privilege comes disguised as pain that finally breaks what was never meant to hold you together. This breaking isn't your destruction, it's your liberation. The version of yourself that learned to perform for love, to shrink for acceptance, to silence your needs for someone else's comfort, that version is finally cracking apart. And maybe for the first time in your life, it's not you that's breaking. It's the false self you constructed just to feel worthy of being chosen. The mask you wore so long you forgot your real face was underneath. You weren't born knowing how to perform for love. You were taught it. Taught to be quiet when your voice threatened someone's peace. Taught to be helpful when your needs felt inconvenient. Taught to become whoever they wanted you to be because the alternative, being alone, felt like annihilation. So you shaped yourself like clay in someone else's hands, believing that if you just got the formula right this time, maybe they'd stay. Maybe this time you'd be enough. But here's what that teaching cost you: your connection to your authentic self. You've been living as a collection of adaptations, a series of responses to other people's expectations, a performance that never ends because the audience keeps changing the rules. And now, as this relationship crumbles, you're not just losing them, you're facing the terrifying possibility of finding yourself. The storm you thought was beautiful because you learned to dance in it left you shaking, left you small, left you convinced that intensity equals intimacy. You romanticized the fights because they felt like fire, but all they did was burn your self-worth to ashes. You turned your pain into poetry because it gave your emptiness a rhythm, a purpose, a reason to exist. But Jung reminds us that we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Maybe this person wasn't your soulmate. Maybe they were you, meeting your unhealed trauma dressed up as desire. Stop calling it fate just because it felt familiar. Stop turning your suffering into art just because it made your loneliness feel meaningful. You don't need more drama to feel alive. You need healing that doesn't require you to bleed for it. You need love that doesn't cost you your sanity, your peace, your sense of self. The person you fell in love with, they never actually existed. You fell in love with their potential, with the version of them that lived in rare glimpses, the person who apologized just skillfully enough to keep your hope alive, who showed up just enough to make you believe in their capacity for change. You built an entire future in your mind around the person they could become, not the person they consistently chose to be. Every disappointment, every broken promise, every moment they showed you who they really were, you explained it away. They're just not ready yet, you told yourself. They're still growing, still learning, still becoming the person I know they can be. But hope, when misplaced, transforms into self-betrayal, and the longer you cling to their potential, the more you abandon your own reality. They're not evolving toward the person you need them to be. They're not on some heroic journey of transformation. The only thing growing is your tolerance for treatment that shrinks your spirit. Jung wrote about projection being one of the commonest psychological phenomena. And that's exactly what happened. You projected who you needed them to be onto someone who never asked to carry that weight, never promised to become that person, never even knew that version of themselves existed in your mind. Now you're grieving the loss of someone who was never fully real, and that's why the pain feels so surreal, so confusing, so impossible to make sense of. You're not letting go of a person, you're letting go of a dream. And dreams don't die quietly. They shatter with the sound of hope hitting reality, leaving you to pick up pieces of a future that was never going to happen. But after that shattering, something authentic can finally take root, if you're brave enough to see clearly, if you're willing to stop making excuses for why love has to hurt, why connection has to feel like chaos, why being wanted requires you to become someone you're not. The space where your illusions used to live can become the garden where your real self finally grows. The silence feels deafening after they leave. Every corner of your life that they occupied, your morning thoughts, your evening routines, your weekend plans, now echoes with their absence. That hollow ache in your chest isn't just missing them, it's the sound of meeting the void they helped you avoid. The emptiness was always there, waiting beneath the distraction of their presence, and now there's nowhere left to hide from it. This is the moment most people run. They sprint toward the next distraction, the next person, the next drama that will fill the terrifying quiet. But this silence, this uncomfortable spaciousness, this is actually where healing begins. Not with closure from them, not with answers to questions that don't matter anymore, but with your willingness to sit in the raw, unfiltered discomfort of being alone with yourself. Every time you resist feeling this discomfort, every time you scroll through your phone to avoid the stillness, every time you reach for anything that numbs the ache, you delay your own rebirth. Jung knew that consciousness comes with a price. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. This isn't poetic wisdom meant to sound profound, it's surgical precision. Growth requires you to feel what you've been avoiding. Waking up to who you are without their validation to define you takes courage most people never summon. But if you can hold steady in the loneliness, if you can stay present with yourself through the waves of grief and confusion, something fundamental begins to shift. You stop needing to be rescued from your own life. You stop chasing external noise to fill internal silence. You start hearing your own voice again, quiet at first, unfamiliar after being silenced for so long, but undeniably yours. That's the gift hidden in discomfort, the chance to remember who you were before you tried so desperately to be loved, before you learned that your worth was negotiable, that your needs were inconvenient, that your boundaries were suggestions rather than requirements. There's a script running in your subconscious that you didn't write, but you've been following it like gospel your entire life. It whispers that love must hurt to be real, that you must earn affection through performance, that you should tolerate distance and accept less than you deserve just to be chosen by someone. anyone. It tells you that your needs are excessive, your voice too loud, your boundaries selfish obstacles to connection. Every time you stay silent when you should speak up, every time you settle for crumbs when you deserve the whole feast, you reinforce that ancient programming. You didn't choose this script. It was written by wounds, by disappointments, by a childhood that taught you love was conditional and your worth was something you had to prove daily. But you can choose to rewrite it, starting now. It begins with small acts of revolution, saying no without explaining yourself, into exhaustion, asking for what you need without apologizing for having needs. Walking away the first time someone shows you their care comes with conditions. It feels wrong at first, even selfish, because your nervous system is calibrated for survival, not self-worth. What used to love that doesn't cost you your peace? Jung understood that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is your moment to flip the script. You stop calling abandonment love. You stop calling anxiety chemistry. You stop calling emotional chaos connection. And you start calling respect the baseline, not the exception. Not just from others, but from yourself first and foremost. Because healing begins the moment you stop betraying your own heart to keep someone else comfortable. You've been searching for someone to complete you because parts of yourself were never allowed to fully develop. The protector, the nurturer, the fierce advocate, the gentle dreamer. You learned to outsource these qualities instead of cultivating them within yourself. You looked for safety in someone else's strength and softness in someone else's care, creating a dependency that felt like love but was actually a form of emotional scaffolding. Every time they disappointed you, it wasn't just heartbreak, it was the collapse of your borrowed stability. Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies that exist within everyone. Most of us were taught to favor one and reject the other, to push through but never pause, to give endlessly but never protect our own energy. We walk lopsided into relationships, hoping someone else will carry what we're missing. But that's not love, that's dependency disguised as devotion. You reclaim your power when you stop waiting for someone to protect you and become your own safe harbor. When you stop needing someone to understand you and start holding space for your own emotions. When you stop looking for someone to balance you and start integrating all parts of yourself. That's what wholeness feels like. It's not cold or detached or emotionally unavailable. It's calm. It's the harmony that comes when both your doing and your being work together, when your strength and your softness coexist without contradiction. From that place of integration, love becomes a choice rather than a lifeline, an enhancement to your life rather than a desperate attempt to escape it. Every time you choose chaos over calm, you abandon yourself a little more. You tell yourself it's just how love is. But your soul knows better. Your soul knows that love shouldn't feel like walking barefoot on broken glass, constantly decoding mixed signals, apologizing for wanting basic consistency, or shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's limited capacity for genuine intimacy. You weren't designed to live in emotional survival mode. You weren't made to constantly question your worth or to treat peace like a luxury you can't afford. Peace isn't something someone grants you. It's something you decide to stop sacrificing. The moment you refuse to trade your calm for connection, everything changes. You walk away sooner. You speak up louder. You stop mistaking emotional intensity for something sacred. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Looking inside means asking the hard questions. Why do I keep choosing relationships that require me to abandon myself? Why do I believe love must come with suffering? Why does peace feel boring when chaos feels familiar? Your nervous system isn't wired for perpetual drama. It's craving safety, consistency, the kind of love that doesn't require you to perform for it. You don't need more passion that burns you out. You need peace that builds you up. Because when peace becomes your standard, when you refuse to accept anything that disturbs your inner equilibrium, you stop being available for relationships that diminish you. There comes a moment of reckoning, when you realize the person you've been fighting so hard to hold on to was never the one keeping you stuck. You were. You were the one gripping the illusion with white knuckles. You were the one telling yourself the same story on repeat. You were the one afraid to meet the version of yourself that doesn't need saving, doesn't need fixing, doesn't need someone else's love to feel worthy of existing. That version of you, whole, powerful, unshakable, is still there, waiting behind the heartbreak, waiting beneath the noise of your thoughts, waiting for you to finally say enough. You've cried enough over people who couldn't love you the way you deserve. You've begged enough, bent enough, betrayed yourself enough in the name of keeping someone who was always going to leave anyway. This isn't about them anymore. It's about you choosing to stop playing small just to be tolerated. It's about standing up in the middle of your own pain and declaring, I will not build a home out of someone who keeps walking out the door. Jung knew that transformation doesn't come from fixing other people. It comes from facing yourself with radical honesty. This is your turning point. Not the end of your story, but the beginning of the chapter where you choose yourself. You don't heal by going back to what broke you. You heal by going inward, by becoming the love you've been seeking, by choosing your peace over proving your worth to people who were never worthy of the energy you spent on them. So what happens now? You rise. You rise not in anger or revenge, but in quiet dignity. You rise in the knowledge that you are not half a person waiting for someone else to complete you. You are whole. You always were. And now finally, you're ready to live like it.